There's a monster in your chest. These guys hijacked your ship, and they sold your cryotube to this human, and he put an alien inside of you. It's a really nasty one. And in a few hours, it's gonna burst its way through your rib cage, and you're gonna die.
My mommy always said there were no monsters, no real ones. But there are.
Welcome to the USN Origa.
Nice welcome, Perez. What the hell is this? Are you afraid the six of us are gonna hijack your damn ship, or what?
Elton, these were very, very hard to come by.
So was our cargo.
Wish you could understand what we're trying to do here. The potential for this species goes way beyond urban pacification. New alloys, vaccines. Nothing like this we've ever seen on any world before. We should be very proud.
Who are you?
Ripley Ellen, Lieutenant First Class, number 36706.
Ellen Ripley died 200 years ago. You're not her.
We used blood samples from Fiore 16 on ice, where you died. We've remade you. We cloned you.
It's a queen.
How did you know that?
She'll breed. You'll die.
What the hell is going on here?
He is conducting illegal experiments. He's breeding some sort of... Listen to me! He is breeding an alien species.
It's too late. You can't stop it. It's inevitable.
Not as long as I'm around.
You'll never get out of here alive.
Your attention, please. Non-human presence detected. Evacuation.
I heard you, like, ran into these things before.
That's right.
What did you do?
I died.
Set a goddamn trap!
Who are you?
The 6th of November 1997, Alien Resurrection made its premiere in Paris, France, and got its general release throughout the world on the 26th of November and into early 1998. Produced on a large budget of $75 million and directed by French director Jean-Pierre, it made $161 million worldwide and proved very successful in France, Germany and the UK. Certainly not a failure, but didn't do as well as 20th Century Fox had hoped, especially in the USA. The reviews certainly didn't help its box office. Many critics were mixed on its qualities, and the fans were disappointed with its story. US critics Siskel and Ebert even put it on their list of worst movies of 1997, but the movie was praised, however, for its unique visual design and production values. Alien 3 from 1992 left a bad taste in the mouths of critics and fans, and had a messy production with arguments between the director David Fincher and the studio 20th Century Fox. Despite its wealth of problems, it was a financial success, but with how the movie ended, there was no chance of Ellen Ripley coming back. Many felt this was the finale to the series, and it was time to move on. Sigourney Weaver did say it was sad to say goodbye to the character to producer and writer David Giler at its premiere, and he jokingly suggested they would probably clone Ripley to bring her back. Little did he know that would be the way to continue with a fourth entry in the series. 20th Century Fox knew the Alien series was profitable, and certainly wasn't going to let it disappear, and wanted to do a fourth one, and it needed to have Sigourney Weaver back in the lead role. They settled on hiring Joss Whedon, who at that point had written the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie and contributed to Toy Story, but also had uncredited rewrites on The Getaway, Speed, The Quick and the Dead, Waterworld and Twister. Joss's brief on the studio was that the script to have the horrors of Alien, but the action of the sequel, and Sigourney Weaver must be in it, a task he found difficult and had to resort to cloning her to bring her back. Joss went through a number of drafts until the studio was happy. Producers Walter Hill and David Giler thought the script was rubbish and felt it would ruin the franchise, but they couldn't do anything as the studio had full control. Sigourney Weaver was shocked to learn they were doing a 4th movie, but read Joss's script and was impressed. She thought that the error during Ripley's cloning process would allow her to further explore the character. Since Ripley became part human and part alien would create uncertainty about where her loyalties lay. But Sigourney doesn't come at a cheap price. She received an $11 million paycheck and a co-producer credit. Now Fox had to find a director. Every movie had one behind the camera with a strong visual eye and would bring something new to the table. But by Alien 3 it came clear to many that they wanted a director who would follow the rules and give them what they want, and the director's creative freedom would be restricted. Director Danny Boyle was the producer's first choice to direct the film, due to his success with Trainspotting. Boyle did show an interest and he and his producer met with the studio, but ultimately he decided against taking the project. French director Jean-Pierre came to their attention due to his work on The City of Lost Children. The movie demonstrated his unique visual style, and there was a great opportunity there for him to bring something new to the series. Jean-Pierre was shocked they asked him, but felt honoured. He wasn't interested in doing a sequel, however, let alone a big Hollywood picture. He was working on his script for Amélie, and really wanted to focus on that. Fox did eventually manage to persuade him. Jean-Pierre looked at the movie as a long commercial. He was being hired to help them make this movie. He wasn't going to have control over the script, but could contribute to it if it wasn't too costly, as a lot of the decisions had already been made. But he had the freedom to bring new ideas to the table, and people he wanted to work with. Jean-Pierre hired French special effects supervisor Pitoff and cinematographer Darius Khondji, both of whom he had worked with on The City of Lost Children. Jeannot and Darius watched the Alien movies and studied the lighting and camera setups. They managed to locate production notes from the first movie and discovered they had roughly 900 camera setups. Modern movies at the time had around 1600, so Pierre tried to match modern movie making when trying to compete with other movies with his own. Darius wanted to use the ENR process, which was adding silver to the chemical process of printing film. The result is a very contrasty and desaturated image, with particular rich blacks making shadows really dark. This process was used on Seven and Darius' previous movie, Evita. Apparently from reading a few sources online, Darius wasn't happy with the Blu-ray release of Resurrection because they didn't use the print with the added ENR. I believe earlier releases had the ENR added, such as the Laserdisc and DVD. The early releases had warmer skin tones, where the Blu-ray everyone looks a lot paler. Jeannot's frequent co-director Mark Caro had been asked as well to work on Alien Resurrection, because he and Jeannot had directed The City of Lost Children, but Mark turned it down, but did provide some rough sketches of the characters' costumes. His designs were modified and expanded upon by veteran costume designer Bob Ringwood. Bob later admitted he was very pissed off when the Alien Resurrection making-of book came out, as it credited Mark as the costume designer, and Bob wasn't mentioned at all. Instead of shooting in the UK at Pinewood Studios, they kept the production in the USA and filmed at the 20th Century Fox Studios in California. Shooting started in November of 1996 and ended in April of 1997. A cool piece of trivia, the scene where Ripley throws the basketball behind her was done for real. There is no digital trickery. The ball does go out of frame, which could make you think they manipulated the shot in the computer, but the raw outtakes prove that Sigourney Weaver has some skill. They had to cut quickly once it went in the basket, as Ron Perlman broke character to celebrate the achievement. The cast for Alien Resurrection is an interesting one, with Sigourney Weaver and Winona Ryder being the big stars, as everyone else is kind of relatively unknown to mainstream cinema. The movie doesn't quite have the acting talents of people like John Hurt, Ian Holm and Charles Dance. With the new cast of characters, we have Winona Ryder, apparently cast very early on into the production, plays Anna Lee Cole, the newest crew member of the Betty. She recognises Ripley and has knowledge of the aliens. Cole is later revealed as a synthetic built by other synthetics. Winona was cast to appeal to younger audiences, but at that point her career wasn't really on the up. If say she was cast in Alien 3 for a part, it would have seemed like the right move, as her popularity had hit a high in the early 90s. Michael Wincott, I'm sure everyone remembers from films such as Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and The Crow, plays Frank, the captain of the mercenary ship the Betty. Ron Perlman plays Jonah, a mercenary and member of the Betty's crew. Jonah is very short-tempered and appears to only think about himself and his well-being. Ron had just starred in The City of Lost Children, and at this point in his career was mainly getting parts in TV in the USA, and after Resurrection his career in film was on the up, and he has been working extensively since, and jumped into the comic book world to play Hellboy. Dan Hedaya plays General Martin Perez. Perez is the commanding officer of the Uruguay and supervises the experiments to clone Ripley and study the aliens. Dan has maintained a healthy career in film and TV, and for fans of 80s action movies he was the villain in Commando. Also has the hairiest arms and shoulders on film I've ever seen. J.E. Freeman, who sadly passed away in 2014, plays Dr. Mason Wren. Wren is one of the several scientists aboard the Origai, involved in cloning Ripley and studying the aliens. After the aliens escape, he joins the crew of the Betty in their attempt to flee the ship. He very much operates in the interests of the military and can't be trusted. Dominic Pignon plays John the Betty's mechanic. His character is a paraplegic and makes use of a motorised wheelchair. Dominic has worked with Pierre on many of his films, and before Resurrection he was in Delicatessen and The City of Lost Children. Dominic didn't really move into English language films despite speaking very good English, and continued with his career in French cinema. Talented character actor Brad Dourif plays Jonathan Gediman, another one of the scientists involved in cloning Ripley. He becomes one of the first to be taken to the alien hive for feeding. Brad's had a varied career in film and TV, and has been in a number of movies such as Dune, Exorcist 3, and he is the voice of Chucky. Raymond Cruz plays Vincent DeStefano, a soldier aboard the Origai. When the aliens break out, he joins the crew in their attempts to escape from the ship. Before starring in Resurrection, he was in Under Siege and Clearing Present Danger, and still works steadily today. Gary Dourdan plays Christie, the first mate and second in command of the Betty. He stores pistols hidden under his sleeve so he can draw his weapons quickly. Gary went on to have a successful career in TV, and starred in the show CSI for 8 years. Kim Flowers, a former ballet dancer, plays Hillard, the assistant pilot of the Betty who is romantically involved with the Captain Frank. Her career came to a halt come 1998 and hasn't acted since. Finally, we have Leland Orser as Larry Purvis. Purvis is one of the several humans who have been kidnapped by the crew of the Betty while in cryosleep and delivered to the Origai to serve as hosts for the aliens. He has an alien inside him, which luckily for him appears to be growing slowly, so he decides to flee the ship with the crew from the Betty. The movie is set 200 years after the events on the planet Fury 161, where Ripley died. A group of scientists are operating on behalf of the military, and they have finally completed the cloning process of Ellen Ripley. This has been their 8th attempt. Once cloned in full adult form, they extract the Queen xenomorph and keep Ripley alive for further study, as her DNA is now mixed with the alien, giving her unique abilities, such as super strength, acid for blood, and a psychic link to the aliens. A group of mercenaries arrive at the science space station on their ship the Betty. They deliver several kidnapped humans in stasis, and the military scientists intend to use the humans as hosts for the aliens, raising several adult aliens for study. Ripley warns them that the aliens can't be trained to do their bidding, but the scientists stress the aliens can help further improve medicines and their technology. The Betty crew soon encounters Ripley as they have decided to stay for a few days. Cole recognises Ripley and manages to break into her quarters and tries to kill her, suspecting she may be used to create xenomorphs, but is unaware the creatures have already been born. She tells Ripley she died 200 years ago and she is not the real Ripley but a clone. Cole leaves but is caught by security. Meanwhile, the xenomorphs have quickly matured and are learning fast and manage to escape by killing one of their own. The acidic blood burns through the floor and they escape. Dr. Gediman goes into their enclosure and sees the damage and is quickly grabbed and taken to the hive where the Queen is starting to produce more eggs. Due to Cole's actions, the security team have decided to kill the mercenaries as they can't have the information of their experiments being leaked to the powers that be on Earth. Frank and his team spring a surprise attack and take hostages as they want to return to the Betty. They are alerted by a security breach as the aliens have begun to attack. The aliens have come for Ripley, but she breaks free in time. Frank gets distracted and is left on his own and is quickly taken out by an alien, and his crew discover his remains. Ripley turns up and joins the team, but Cole says Ripley can't be trusted, claiming she is one of them. The space station has started moving due to the emergency and is returning to Earth, which they need to stop before the xenomorphs can make their way to the planet and escape. Alien Resurrection makes use of a wide variety of visual effects and for the first time makes use of CGI to a large extent, with audiences now seeing aliens do things we never saw them do before. Studio ADI, who had worked on Alien 3, were brought back to develop the makeup and creature effects, and also design the new alien called the Newborn. The 90s saw a big change in visual effects, and computer-generated material was becoming more apparent in movies as technology was improving each year. Alien 3 had a small amount of CG, but the fourth movie would realise the aliens in CGI form for the most complicated shots. The digital effects were handled by Blue Sky Studios, VIFX and Pitov's company based in France. Alien 3 had used Boss Film, but for the new movie the studio decided not to use the big FX companies such as ILM and Digital Domain. They went with a number of smaller companies who had expertise in different areas, which helped the production save money. Blue Sky Studios were hired because of their work on the film Joe's Apartment, where they created CGI cockroaches. On Resurrection, they created around 20 shots of CGI aliens. Blue Sky were well known in the industry for their expertise in ray tracing, which is a rendering technique for generating an image by tracing the path of light as pixels in an image plane and simulating the effects of its encounters with virtual objects, essentially clever lighting techniques that creates a very high degree of visual realism. A big chunk of their work is featured in the underwater sequence, which is an effect that hadn't been done before in computer animation. Jeannot asked ADI to lean towards making the new human/alien hybrid creature more human than the xenomorph. An early idea was to replicate Sigourney Weaver's features, but Alec Gillis felt combining a hideous monster with a beautiful woman's face had already been done with Species from 1995. Jean-Pierre was impressed with a design by Chris Cunningham. He had designed his own hybrid, which looks very 2000 AD, and they loosely followed that design. Jeannot wanted the creature to look sympathetic. It had to have human characteristics, and that came with its eyes and the sounds it makes and generally how it moved. Basically, it was this horrible toddler. It was puppeteered by 9 operators, and certainly the most complicated animatronic creature that ADI had designed. The new hybrid alien did have genitalia which resembled a mix of male and female sexes, but 20th Century Fox were uncomfortable with this, and even the director felt it was a bit too much, so they had to fork out a lot of money to hide the genitalia with digital effects. All of the spaceships in the film were miniatures, as visual effects supervisors believed CGI was not effective enough to create realistic spaceships. It was a challenge to light the miniatures with the added silver in the ENR process, so you have to experiment to get the best lighting methods without giving away the miniature's scale, so it took a number of tests to get the best results. I recall at the time people were unimpressed with the CG work. It was a big step to move from puppet work to CGI. For the FX guys involved, I'm sure it was a challenge, and they probably knew fans may react negatively. I think in some parts the aliens don't look decent. I think with them climbing up the ladder and avoiding the bullets and walking down the corridor, it doesn't quite work. It all looks too shiny. The underwater work I think is brilliant, however. When you see it explode, it's very polished in its realism. A common trait of 90s CG work is that they overdid it with compositing, having so many elements applied to a shot, and the digital resolution can't match film and even optical work. It certainly gets rid of the black lines and grading issues, but lacks the resolution. When you look at the CG work from that decade, you can often tell it's that 90s look for computer animation. Studio ADI I think provides some of their best work. They are such experts when it comes to aliens and gory effects. You can always trust them to deliver. Seeing the entrance to the Queen's Hive is pretty impressive, and nothing we'd seen before. The film plays up the slight sexual nature of it all. I suppose it was like seeing an H.R. Giger painting in motion. However, I do think the aliens in the film are a bit too dribbly. I think they overdid it with the KY jelly. Designing a brand new alien is a tough challenge, and I think they created something interesting but ultimately flawed. Because of its size, there isn't much movement. Its arms are too long and makes it look puppeteered than having any natural movement. It has to be covered in a creative way, which is what they attempt to do. I think all the efforts are put into its face, and it's a pretty nasty monster. Its eyes look very real, and the childish noise it makes is unsettling, but I think the design wasn't received well by the fans on the whole. Its yellowish skin makes it look like it's made out of chicken korma. I don't ever recall seeing many people wanting to buy a statue or figure of this new monster. To be honest, I don't ever think I ever saw one on sale. The visual effects and makeup work is certainly a huge step up from Alien 3. That movie was inconsistent with its visuals, and Resurrection is certainly more polished on the whole. With it being that cross point from practical to CG, you often see those transitions don't work as well. You can easily tell what's practical and what is computer generated, but they were certainly very ambitious in doing things that hadn't been done before, so in all the effects have stood up well over time despite my issues with a number of shots. John Frizzell composed a score to Alien Resurrection. This was one of his early scores, and he had just recently worked on Beavis and Butthead Do America and Dante's Peak, and since working on Alien 4 he has gone on to produce many scores for horror movies. John had heard the 4th movie was in production and sent in 4 cassette tapes to audition for the position of composer. By chance the director listened to the music and was impressed, and a meeting was arranged between Jean-Pierre and John, and he was hired. John Frizzell spent 7 months writing and recording the score, which Jeannot requested to be very different and unique from the previous films in the series, but there are cues that reference to previous scores, as they throw in the hypersleep track from the first movie that pops up near the beginning and when Ripley returns to the Betty. The score included themes of romance and eroticism and creates a new theme for Ripley in her cloned form. I think once they get to Earth, John Frizzell really gives it its all with the finale, delivering it with a big harmony. Elliot Goldenthal used a similar method to end Alien 3. The score to Resurrection is certainly very interesting, it's atmospheric and melodic, it certainly serves the movie well and complements its visuals and tone. It doesn't quite have the memorable themes of the other three, however. The composer said he wasn't very literal with highlighting the themes. Each score of the series is very different from the other. Alien is this lush sci-fi score that has really eerie sounds, Aliens has the military-driven score with bombastic action cues, and number 3 has this industrial experimental approach with modern orchestral harmonies. Resurrection, like the others, offers something new, but I don't think it's quite as memorable for me. It's surprising they went with a younger composer who didn't have that many scores under his belt. They could have easily picked someone like James Newton Howard or Basil Poledouris, but then again it's good to see studios give younger people opportunities to prove themselves and further their career. The score got its release on CD in 1997 with 45 minutes of music and was given an expanded release in 2010 by LELAND Records and issued with a 2-CD set which contained unreleased music and the original album. Sadly, this 2-disc set is sold out and the original album is not available for streaming, so if you want to add it to your collection you will have to hunt down a copy from a private seller. Now, for anyone who owned the VHS of Alien Resurrection, you may remember an advert for an upcoming video game that was announced for the PlayStation and PC, but it never came out when intended. The game was originally developed by Fox Interactive as a third-person survival horror game, very much like Resident Evil, but the game was eventually scrapped and was started again from scratch, which is surprising considering the movie didn't do that well, and the window to profit on any tie-in had essentially been closed. Argonaut Studios were hired to produce a first-person shooter that would be exclusively developed for the PlayStation. The game was eventually released in late 2000. It consists of 10 levels, the first 9 taking place in the Uruguay space station and the last level aboard the Betty. The player uses 4 different characters from the movie. You play as Ripley for the majority of the game, while Carl, DiStefano and Christie each get their own level. The game didn't go down too well with video game critics at the time, many complaining that it was too difficult, but most pointed out its frustrating controls. The programmers decided to make use of the analog controls for the PlayStation joypad to move and look around, which is now the common method of playing first-person shooters. The game wasn't the first to include this option, however. Medal of Honor was the first to do that, but this game was the first to make them the default controls. You only need to browse the old GameSpot review, which spent the majority of its critique bashing the controls, so I think it was unfairly judged, and it was doing something new. It helped influence the genre of first-person shooters for games consoles. Due to its poor sales and late timing, ports to the PC and Dreamcast were cancelled. I think the graphics for the time and coming from a PlayStation, they looked pretty good, so I definitely think it's worth your time to play it, and it's certainly not as bad as critics made it out to be. First thing I would like to say is that I don't hate Alien Resurrection. I don't think it's a bad movie or a really good one, but just a well-made film that has unfortunately a very mediocre script. It does have some interesting ideas, but fundamentally the story doesn't really go anywhere. Now, going back to early 1998 when I saw the film when it hit VHS, I made an effort to hunt down a widescreen VHS tape. At that point, more widescreen versions of movies were starting to become more readily available, and I didn't own a Laserdisc player at that point, so I did watch it how it was intended to be seen. First impressions back then was that it looked really good. The photography and its visual effects seemed to me very polished. I do think its visual style may not be for everyone, however. Its very earthy colours such as the browns and yellows may not be the best colour palette for the Alien series, but it was doing something different and unique, which each Alien film always seemed to do. If you are familiar with Jean's previous movie, The City of Lost Children, there is a familiar design in its lighting, but does feel slightly watered down for his Hollywood outing. What is very apparent is its super stylised direction and camera work, making it feel less like the other movies. Aliens 1 to 3 had this gritty style to them, and often felt like a documentary. Resurrection had these over-the-top camera moves as it zooms towards the actor, or we see the camera dive down Larry's throat and into his chest. It was a bit too much, and a departure from what went before. It felt like an attempt to appease younger audiences. You could say coming across as more of a comic book movie. The cast of characters are somewhat bland. I don't think anyone gives a bad performance per se, but no one really is given a chance to shine, or have any interesting dialogue, thus making the majority of them forgettable. Ron Perlman is gold in everything he's in. He is certainly my favourite character, as his shitty attitude to everyone brings out quite a lot of humour. I think he does his best to elevate the dialogue, and when he sees that spider and shoots it, it's definitely one of my favourite scenes. I hate spiders, so if I was in that situation I would certainly do the same thing. It's clear they're trying to capture the team of aliens, but the scenes and dialogue just don't give them much to do. Dominique does a fine job with his part, and I was very happy to see him survive at the end. I think he and Ron are certainly the best of the new characters. Ripley I felt less attached to in this one. Her character is all over the place. When we are introduced to her, she is distant and not the same person we knew. She is gradually getting her memories back and her personality is returning, but she acts weird, as you might expect with the mixed DNA from the alien. She acts like the alien is the enemy to her, then she returns to the hive and is introduced to the newborn, then attempts to escape, and when she bumps into the crew she acts like classic Ripley we all know and love. There is this uneven tone to her performance that makes it unclear how much she is connected to the aliens and how much of her original personality has returned. There are some really good moments with Sigourney. I think she is a superb actor and great in everything she's in. Her best moment is when she sees all the clones, and you can see her heart break when she sees version 7, who is all twisted up and in pain and wants to be killed. Sigourney's emotions seem very real. It's disturbing and upsetting at the same time. Winona is okay in the part, but her character is just there to serve the plot, and she seems more of an irritant than someone we really want to get invested in. I want to know more about these synthetics and how she joined the mercenaries. I think more opportunities could have been made to make us feel invested in this new set of characters. Frank, for example, gets killed off very early on. I think Wincott did a good job of his performance and is just wasted. The script shortchanges potentially interesting characters for bland ones. I feel setting it 200 years later was a mistake. The Weyland-Yutani company is no longer around and has been replaced with this military operation and their science division. We aren't given much information about them and they don't really seem a threat to Ripley. In Alien, and especially Alien 3, the company was this evil corporation who wanted the xenomorph as a weapon, so Ripley was battling the aliens and the corporate people of Earth wanting to profit from this monster. The date of the year in Alien 3, for example, didn't feel like they couldn't take advantage of cloning. You get the impression their technology was more than capable. Resurrection is certainly the goriest out of the series and is not the one to watch while eating your dinner, which I often like to say when something is a bit too graphic. The death of many of the characters featured throughout, they don't hide away from those bloody scenes. The death of the new alien is really disturbing, I think. Seeing it get sucked out of a tiny hole into space and you see all its innards fall out and it's crying like a baby. Not comfortable viewing, which is their intent, but a bit too much for me. I think there's a certain level of nastiness in this film. I think the others in the series often cut away at a certain point and were a bit more creative in how they showed you those horrifying moments. It's clear they have chosen to be more graphic to compete with modern horror. The Alien franchise to me wasn't just about being bloody and gory, it was about what was lurking in the shadows and a sense of being isolated. They never showed you too much of the alien and were creative in what they did show you due to the limitations of someone in a costume. But that actually worked in its favour, and now seeing these aliens swimming around and seeing them, for example, planning an escape felt so odd to me. It was like they were giving them too much character. Jean-Pierre was a gun for hire. He did what the studio wanted, but they gave him creative freedom with the designs and the look of the film, and in retrospect he is very happy with what he did on the film. Even H.R. Giger was pleased with the results. If you watch a big documentary that came with the DVD and Blu-rays, many felt the script was good and the production was relatively stress-free, but also some felt it didn't really bring anything new, and overall it just looked really nice. I think the studio had learnt their lessons on Alien 3, and they had a director who was willing to please them and kept everything on schedule and avoided any drama. But ultimately it's a very safe movie for the studio, and you get that impression. I look upon Alien Resurrection as a great continuation in the technical achievements we've come to expect from the Alien series. There's always something interesting brought forward, with the visual styles and the overall cosmetic designs that make each one different from the other. It demonstrated at that point the studio didn't want to take the risk of not continuing the series without Sigourney Weaver. Having her return through the basis of cloning does undermine her departure at the end of Alien 3. The third film is messy and uneven, but when she sacrifices herself the emotions are there, and her story arc had finished. It's always risky moving forward without the lead, but I think they should have gone a different direction and cast a new character to battle the aliens. They paid a lot to get Sigourney Weaver to return, but end up putting her in a movie that seems to tick all the boxes the studio wanted in that spreadsheet decision sort of a way to avoid any risks. But you end up down familiar territory, and the film ends up with a very underwhelming ending. She finally gets to Earth and we don't see it. Well, in the special edition you get to see Paris all destroyed. In the theatrical cut they mention Earth being a shithole, but when they arrive it seems alright. Well, from a distance anyway. But you realise in the extended cut what they were referring to. You just need Bruce Campbell to turn up saying, "I slept too long!" They could have at least landed there and the new alien begins to attack and they finally manage to kill it. Just something extra than just being another face-off with aliens on a spaceship. A change of location was certainly needed. Resurrection is the furthest they got with the timeline, and now everything has gone back before Alien with Prometheus and Covenant, very much like Star Trek is doing now. Resurrection displayed they clearly run out of ideas once they brought Ripley back. Covenant yet again showed us they are repeating themselves with familiar setups and scares. That's the unfortunate problem with doing sequels, things get very samey. I think many fans of sci-fi and the Alien series in general have seen this movie, and I think most look upon it unfavourably, which is understandable. If I were to watch this or the Alien vs Predator sequels, I would certainly watch Resurrection, but despite its superior effects and clear narrative, I still think it's weaker than Alien 3, thus making it the weakest of the Sigourney Weaver series. Resurrection is not a huge dud or a mistake, it's just an average movie, and that's its biggest crime. I expect better from the series, and its ending just leaves a bad taste in your mouth. Hopefully one day someone will come up with a great idea to give new life to the series, and we see a continuation on from Alien Resurrection.